Polygonatum here, Smilacina. There's Actinidia growing in here, a kiwi. There's a viburnum, and then there's impatiens growing around the base. Not to mention the grasses. It's staggering.
Getting this classification straight is really very, very important. It matters a lot where they came from and what they're related to. That tells you a lot about why they are the way they are today.
Just a few blocks away from the fabled herbarium at Kew Gardens, scientists have a new tool to sort this all out. Today, genetic material, or DNA, from living plants is helping to build a more accurate family tree.
Getting DNA from a plant is one of the easiest things to do. You can actually do it in your kitchen. It doesn't look like anything. When you can see it, of course, you're looking at millions and millions of base pairs of DNA.
This slimy glob is the plant's DNA and is made up of the 4 familiar bases, A, C, T, and G. Mark Chase, the head of the laboratory, translated that DNA evidence into a massive computer matrix. Thousands of base pairs of DNA for each plant are put into the matrix and then compared with other plants. The color coding of the base pairs helps to identify differences. It is the multi-species plant equivalent of the Human Genome Project.
There were 43 co-authors on the paper. This was a mammoth undertaking.
The computer analysis was so complex, it required a consortium of scientists, including Doug and Pam Soltis of the University of Florida.
The same sort of analysis is done in the animal kingdom. For example, humans and chimps have DNA sequences that are 99-point-something% the same, and by inference then, the chimps are the closest relatives to the humans.
Here we can see a place where it's really identical for that particular...
The closer the DNA sequence, the closer the evolutionary relationship of two plants, which then allows them to group genetically similar plants together. The results aren't so easy to get your hands around.
This part is not flowering plants, and this part is not flowering plants, and everything in the middle is flowering plants.
So we have many, many hundreds, thousands of plants that are representing the diversity of green life. You can see each line is a different plant, and what we can see on this tree is that some of these come out very close together, and those are close relatives. Those are what we call a closely related group, or clade. So here is one small clade, here's a larger group or cluster or clade, and then so on, and so on, and so on, down through the green plant tree of life.
Now, with the assurance of DNA insight, the family tree of living flowering plants has largely been written. The old family tree was now in for a major pruning. Roses were found to be closely related to squash, strawberries to marijuana, this meat-eating pitcher plant to China's famous rhododendrons. For centuries, water lilies were thought to be nearly twins with the lotus. No longer.
And this, believe it or not, is the closest living relative of the lotus. This is the London plane tree, or sycamore. And as you can see, this is not a little water plant, this is a big tree.
Driving me nuts!
Andy Dara is in charge of tending to a garden at Kew that is organized by the old family tree of plants. It's called the order beds. He's got the somewhat overwhelming job of trying to bring order to the new order.
We're in this weird limbo period. I'm trying to not only do a job of gardening, mowing, edging and weeding constantly, but I've also got to try and keep myself up to date. And I've also got to try and understand plant science and botany. I wish it was simpler, but it's not.
Perhaps the biggest surprise from the DNA evidence is that when all the number crunching was done, one plant showed up at the very bottom of the family tree of living flowering plants. Amberella, the oldest branch of the family tree. a plant so rare that it is only found on the remote Pacific island nation of New Caledonia. So is Amberella the world's oldest flowering plant, not the fossil Archifructus that Sunge discovered? Not necessarily.
The molecular evidence allows us to really understand living plants in enormous detail. What it doesn't allow us to do is account for all of the diversity that's extinct.
Archifructus is an example of this. We don't know where it would fit in the new molecular tree because we do not have its DNA.
So we've got a difficult problem as to how to integrate these two lines of evidence, but they're both equally important in helping us to understand the complete picture.
Dilcher and Sunge are working on that complete picture. They have compared the leaves, pollen, and other visible structures of Archifructus with Amberella. Their analysis claims that Archifructus looks more primitive and therefore evolved first. That is why they call it the oldest flowering plant, the first flower that we know of.
I don't really know that there weren't other flowering plants living in other parts of the world, in other environments in the world. But you cannot deny the fossil record. It's there. It's hard evidence that these ancient flowering plants did exist.
Today, Archifructus can be seen in its proper environment, in this visiting exhibit at the California Academy of Science. Here they have a diorama that recreates life in northern China more than 100 million years ago. Growing at the side of the lake is a model of Archifructus.
It's called an arbor vitae.
It is one of the earliest known flowering plants.
By being here, it is also a reminder that by giving us food and medicine, fragile flowering plants did far more to change the future of our world than any of these powerful monsters.
The steps between the first flower, such as Archifructus, and the beautiful flowers in my garden are really giant steps in the evolution of flowering plants. But in my mind, I can visualize the relationship that I see in the flowers in my garden with what I find in the fossil record.
Meanwhile, who knows what clues to the evolution of flowers may be growing in this vast safety deposit box of plant diversity in Western China and elsewhere around the world? Or how long those clues will last. The United Nations has declared the Hengduan Mountains to be under ecological threat from growing urbanization.
Species of plants have been disappearing fast. If we don't protect them, many will be lost.
Several international organizations have called for an increased effort to protect this region before its diversity is lost forever to the modern-day glacier of environmental destruction. Dilcher and Sunge know that there are other fossils out there that will illuminate the mystery of the first flower. They are both determined to find them. The full mystery of how flowering plants began has not been solved, but as one leading botanist says, it is a mystery, but no longer an abominable one.
Nova is a production of WGBH Boston. Major funding for Nova is provided by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, serving society through biomedical research and science education, HHMI. Major funding for Nova is also provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by PBS viewers like you. Thank you.
I am PBS.